Our host today is somebody I'm really excited to also have in the room, and that is one of our Livestrong board members. As a board member for Livestrong, she is tasked with the finance side and the audit committee, and I'm so glad it's her and not me. So everybody, I will hand over hosting duties to Dina Jansen. Dina, thanks for being here today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me and welcome everybody. I am Dina Jansen and a proud board member of Livestrong. And if you will do me the honor and let me look down at my notes, because I want to do this session intro justice because it is important. It grabbed my heartstrings and I can't wait to hear from the folks that'll be bringing us the important information. And so if you will, if my eyes start down, you'll know where I'm headed. So fertility has been a part of the Livestrong commitment to improving survivorship since 2004. And since that time, we have helped over 16,000 women and men affected by cancer have a chance at a family. And in partnership with EMD Serrano, we've saved them over $83 million. So today, our network reaches from coast to coast, partnering with fertility clinics to reduce their costs for people who never planned to need their services. And while fertility itself is a costly endeavor, even with our discounts and drug program, there's a subset of this group who not only endures the higher economic costs, but they also arguably have the higher emotional one as well. But today, we are honored to have a group of cancer survivors who were able to preserve their eggs, but then we're faced with the reality of not being able to carry a pregnancy. And so to help tell their story and to share more about what surrogacy is about is Dean Hutchison. Dean is the Vice President of Legal Services for Circle Surrogacy and is not only an advocate, but a strong advocate, a trusted advocate for those who are facing this very challenging journey. So Dean, ladies who are gonna help us out on our panel, welcome. Dean, the gallery is yours.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank Livestrong for having me. I'm honored and privileged. I've done a lot of talks in the last 17 years, and this is the most nervous I've ever been. I don't want to step all over the amazing stories we'll hear. But I think when talking to this group and what we want to get across is really three things. And number one is the education and awareness of this issue of fertility after cancer, that there are so many people that get, something fell behind me, obviously, in the middle, you get struck with this diagnosis of something huge. And then secondary to that, you find out about the fertility issues. And a lot of people don't hear about it until it might be too late to preserve, or they don't know all the information, just that they're getting their eggs harvested and they might be able to use them in the future. Second to that is advocacy, and that's on many levels. That's whether it's the state and federal level to get insurance funding, to get legislation to help surrogacy easier, to make surrogacy and assisted reproductive technology easier in the states, so that everyone can take advantage of these family building opportunities. And also from a financial standpoint, to get advocacy, to get groups, to get Livestrong and other partners and help them raise more money to help people in these situations. And then finally is hope. And that is that for providers, for survivors, for patients, that you don't think there's anyone else out there going through this, or you don't think you're going to have that family in the future because of that diagnosis. That no, there are many people that have gone before you that have done this. There are many people fighting the fight now for you, and you can join that fight. So with that said, I want to speak as little as possible. I want to introduce the three amazing women and their stories. So you'll hear today from Kristen Stewart, who Suzanne already mentioned. You'll hear from Alexa Flowers, and you'll hear from Kelly DeRosa about their individual journeys. They're all at different steps of both their cancer experience and their fertility journeys, but their unique situations will probably add light to something that you didn't think about. So for each of you, I'll start with Kristen. If you just want to give a brief intro of how you got here, why you're here, and the fertility issues you face.
Definitely. So hi guys, I'm Kristen Stewart. I'm 30, living in Manhattan. And about 2.5 years ago, I was suddenly feeling super nauseous with headaches. I learned were seizures. I went to the NYU emergency room, learned that I had a brain tumor and needed emergency surgery. So 2 days later, they removed half of the grade 2 glioma tumor. And then I was at inpatient rehab Rusk. outpatient rehab Kessler, and then used Livestrong amazingly to freeze my eggs before starting my next journey. So I'm an MSK patient, and I spent 6 weeks doing the proton radiation and chemo, then went through a year of monthly double strength chemo pills. During this wild journey, I also wanted to capture it. So I have my 1 second a day videos, and I also wrote a memoir called My Brainstorm. You can find it on Amazon if you ever want to check it out. And I am passionate about sharing my journey, which also really led to my family and friends creating a Cycle for Survival team. So I'm also passionate about, raising an amount there. A fun fact, Alexa, who is also in this, her and I actually grew up together in the same town, and we reconnected through social media when realizing we have the same brain cancer. Yet she was ahead of me, and she was in the middle of the surrogacy journey, which she told me about. And I honestly was taken aback, realizing how complex the process was. So last summer, when we were all isolated during COVID, I actually spent a ton of time researching, connecting with many organizations and individuals in the cancer field, including you, Dean, whether medical or nonprofit. And I honestly shockingly learned that financial support for cancer patients whose option is only surrogacy doesn't exist. So I presented that missing link to Suzanne, and here we are today. So that's me.
Thank you. And we'll obviously be back with more questions. And now, Alexa, if you want to give a brief introduction as well.
Absolutely. So as you see, Chrissy and my stories kind of are intertwined. But in 2018, I was, currently I'm 29, and when I was 26, I was just feeling very nauseous. I would get extremely ill for no reason. It didn't seem to matter what I ate, where I was. There was kind of no link for me, and we were sort of searching for an answer. And one day I just kind of had it. So I went to the ER, and they did a brain scan and found my grade 2 glioma. Due to the nature of my tumor, the size and location, it's inoperable. So my only option was very aggressive chemo and radiation. At that time in our lives, my husband and I were actively trying to start a family. Like, this was our time. And that was my main question throughout the entire process. When can I safely become pregnant? When can I start my family? And I got a bunch of different answers, and I did my due diligence to kind of interview my medical team to find the best person for me. And my oncologist that I inevitably ended up with at MSK, said we have enough anecdotal evidence to really show that pregnancy with your tumor, with many patients who suffer from cancer with their tumors, that women who have a controlled tumor, controlled cancer, they become pregnant, and better than 50% of them were having aggressive tumors, regression. And she said, have you considered surrogacy? And, that was my introduction into it. And I immediately, within a span of a month, I froze my eggs. And I was lucky enough to have great friends reach out and offer to carry our baby. So I really kind of didn't research as much as Chrissy did. I learned flying by the seat of my pants and just slowly learning just the sheer strain of the situation that I was in, and what it really was taking to just have a baby, which a lot of people can normally do. So that's how I kind of came to be here.
Nice, thank you. And then finally, Kelly Della Rosa, if you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your backstory as well.
Sure, I have some similarities as the other two ladies here too, but I had a different type of cancer. I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor. I got married when I was 23, kind of living the dream, had a great job, and planned to have a family pretty quickly. I'm a big time planner. I think it sounds like the other two ladies in here are big planners, and cancer kind of threw all that out the window. Just short of our 1-year wedding anniversary, I felt a lump in my right breast, and I was like, oh, it's okay, you're so young, there's no way it's anything serious, but just get it checked out. And I saw a couple different doctors, and then I ended up at MSK as well, so I'm also an MSK patient. And it turned out I wasn't too young and that I had stage 2B breast cancer. And so I kind of fast tracked some of the treatment options, and I had a mastectomy pretty quickly. And then they talked about some options for chemotherapy because it was a large tumor. And luckily they sent me right over to a nurse who was, her sole job was to talk about fertility preservation, which I was very impressed by because I didn't expect that conversation to happen so early. And I froze my eggs with the hope that it would be a backup plan. And then I proceeded to have my chemo treatments. And then I was supposed to be on 5 years of a hormonal therapy, and then I was supposed to be done. I didn't quite make that 5 years. So then in 2016, just shy of that 5-year mark, I had a recurrence, and it was found kind of in a strange way. I was having an MRI to look at the breast implant that I had, just run-of-the-mill MRI, and it found a tumor in my lymph nodes. So I had to go in and have more surgery, and then I ended up having more chemo and proton therapy. So it was a whole game changer for me. And it really, at that point, the egg freezing wasn't the backup plan anymore. It was the plan. And like Alexa, I kind of got thrown into the whole surrogacy world because my older sister, who's 7 years older than me, offered to carry a baby for us, which was the greatest gift. And my daughter was born in April, and it was a 2-year journey and lots of heartache. And I'm sure you'll get to some of those questions, but it definitely wasn't what I expected in terms of the surrogacy and things being as easy as I anticipated. But she's here, and I guess my hope in being here, and I'm a Live Strong leader too, is just to help other people to navigate this process, because it's not easy and it's really emotionally taxing. And I found that it was more emotionally taxing to go through this process than to go through cancer twice. So I'm happy to be here and share my story.
Thanks so much. So each of you kind of alluded to it, but if you could kind of highlight maybe that period between your kind of cancer diagnosis and then the wherewithal of the acknowledgement of the fertility piece. Like, what was the timeline between the two kind of separate diagnoses, and then maybe what resources were provided to you, and maybe what do you wish you had, what more could have been provided to you at that time? So, Kristen, you want to jump on first again?
Yeah, so what I can say is, since I haven't gone through the process like these two amazing women, I really was shocked when Alexa was telling me this was happening. I thought, how did I not know? And thank gosh I did freeze my eggs through Live Strong, but I was single. I was going through this craziest journey, hopefully, of my life, that I hadn't even stopped and thought, well, where are these eggs going? I just kind of assumed that it would be okay. And of course, they'll dive into that. What I can go through is I'm still single. And so throughout the cancer journey and then COVID isolation, I had to pause on dating, and now I'm focusing on it. And I do have to say that it's a huge anxiety of mine of, when do I share this with the person I'm sitting across from? I mean, I'm extremely honest. I mentioned my cancer journey on the first date with everyone, but my fear is because of the money, because of the wild ride of the journey that I'm sure we'll hear. If I were to mention that, would this guy say, no way, why would I want to get involved with this financial burden? So on top of sharing that I went through this cancer journey, I never predicted that I'd also need to focus on, being with someone who would be okay with this surrogacy journey, but also be willing or even able to help financially to support it. So definitely right now, the biggest anxiety I have when connecting with you people, but I'll let the other two take over.
Right. And with your fertility preservation piece now, was it fully funded with Live Strong, or did you have
So Live Strong completely helped there. And then it turns into the matter of, after several years, I'll be paying to freeze them myself. Or will I find my man and go through surrogacy? We shall see. But yes, absolutely, Live Strong was super supportive there.
That's great. And Alexa, if you want to jump into on that kind of timeline period.
Yeah, absolutely. So with me, like I said, everything was happening kind of at the same time. And, I can't necessarily speak for Kelly, but for myself, I'm fertile. I did not have, there are two different facets here. There is IVF in the sense that you are having issues, actively trying to get pregnant and unable to do so, and therefore require medical assistance to achieve that goal. For me, I hadn't even gotten a chance to really try. Everything, all of my eggs that were pulled were in great condition. It's that it was like something that I wanted so desperately that was placed so close in front of me, but I was told I couldn't have. Because at that point, it's really making the informed decision for your family in the future. It's saying, do I want to risk and become pregnant myself, which I can do? Or do I want, and then risk getting sicker, risk potentially not being there for my children in the future, which is the ultimate goal. Pregnancy is the facet that gets us there. So it's that heartbreaking decision that we had to make as a family to, and so luckily we had the option of surrogacy to have our biological children. But that decision, it was extremely heartbreaking to make. And, as we can get into it later, as Kelly mentioned, surrogacy is really, you can't expect what emotions you feel, what your gestational carrier or surrogate feels, and you have to roll with it. But there are so many things that are just unexpected and constantly hit the same spot that's, constantly sore from just going through cancer and knowing that this is your life. So, yeah.
That's totally. I've been doing it for 17 years, so I know. I don't know from the emotional standpoint of being in it, but I've worked with, I think, thousands of parents now, and we like to try and make it as smooth as possible, but there's just as many bumps in the road in the surrogacy process as there is in a sole pregnancy. So totally understood. Now, Kelly, I don't know, you kind of touched on it already too, but same thing now. That timeline from diagnosis to kind of the
happened pretty quickly. My oncologist, once I met with her after my mastectomy, she kind of laid out my treatment plan, and there was no way around chemo. So the fertility preservation had to happen if we wanted to have biological children. So that happened early on, and similar to Alexa, it was, I think very heartbreaking to come to the realization after the recurrence that I wasn't going to be able to carry a pregnancy that wasn't safe at that point. Was really hard. But also, I'm on a lot of medication and I can't get pregnant even on that medication. So it's definitely, you're gambling if I were to take a break. And, I think that was very hard for me early on. After the first diagnosis, I constantly was begging my oncologist, oh, can I take a break from the medication? I really want to try to have a baby. It's been 2 years. Can we try? And she always would say to me, you need to know that you did everything you could to make sure that it doesn't come back. And she was right, because it came back, but I was taking the medication. And I think if I wasn't taking the medication, or if I had gotten pregnant, then it could have been worse, and maybe it would have been metastatic. I don't know. So I think you definitely, and I'm sure the other ladies agree, you're making a lot of decisions about, do I choose my health or do I choose my family? And it feels very unfair. And also the money piece too. So I think it's all like you're making decisions that no one else in your life really has to be making, and trying to think about, okay, how much money do we have to put into creating our family, while everybody else, it seems very easy. And I know it's not for everybody, but at the time you're kind of like a little bitter, and I'm sure the other two have that similar feeling.
So I get for Kelly and Alexa, and we know Kristen had some financial support to preserve. Now, in both of your journeys, were you able to tap into any financial support for the egg preservation piece, and then also for the surrogacy piece, or was it mostly funded by yourselves in that stage?
For the egg freezing, I was able to get support from Livestrong. They paid for all the medication, which was a tremendous help. I still paid for some of the freezing and the yearly storage fees, all of that fun stuff. But it was a tremendous help to receive all the medication. In terms of surrogacy, luckily I was able to use my sister. So that kind of circumnavigated that need to pay somebody directly. And she did it out of the goodness of her heart, which is something I could never pay her back for. But my insurance kicked in a little bit, not much. It was more for the cycle, but I had to pay for all the medication and the program fees and the legal fees, which were a lot more than I expected. So yeah, it ended up being a pretty expensive process, but I can imagine if I hadn't used my sister, how much more it would have cost.
Yes, and for me, I had the option of Livestrong, but when everything was happening for me, it was the final days of the year, and I was told that it was not available at that time. So for just cancer doesn't let you choose. So just for me in particular, I did have to pay everything out of pocket. We did, and this is part of the process that becomes difficult. You know, you have GoFundMe pages available and you kind of slap your heart onto a page and you throw that out there and you hope that your family and friends and whoever is kind of passing through is able to kind of crowdsource and assist. So we relied on some GoFundMe, but after a certain point, when you know things don't stop for us. We don't just have one GoFundMe and then everything is fixed, or have one kind donation and then everything is taken care of. So it's consistent. So at a certain point, you don't really want to put another GoFundMe out because you've already asked so much and people have already supported so much. So it's, you rely on yourselves, you get scrappy, you figure out how you can make it work. Like Kelly was saying, how do you shift around finances and make this expense happen that most people, most of your friends are not even at the top of their mind. They're not even considering. So for me, unfortunately, I wasn't able to, but I'm so passionate about getting the support out that this foundation gives, because it does make such a difference. And I'm really hopeful that we're in a great direction to continue to make that difference. So it really does.
Yeah, I think the one thing that surprised me with working with survivors was probably that story that you've heard from maybe other people in support groups, is that if Livestrong is not there, and particularly like 10 years ago when this education wasn't there. I mean, one of my coworkers, who's one of my closest people at work, she had cervical cancer. It wasn't even given an option. It was basically she had to go in for surgery the day after diagnosis, and then 6 months later learned about the fact that now she'd have to do this. But that there's even the ones lucky to preserve, if there's no funding from Livestrong or there's no insurance, you're hit with this diagnosis, you owe up to $30,000 on day 2 to an IVF clinic, and then you have to go through your cancer treatment. So I think all your stories are what help drive this and help let the funding sources know that this is an area they need to jump into. So outside of financial support, the other big issue that we see is kind of the emotional support too. And I don't know if the three of you can talk on any emotional support that was provided either through your care or outside of the care, from both the cancer side as well as the need for surrogate or the need for fertility preservation. Kristen, you want to start?
Sure, yeah. And of course, before diving into the surrogacy aspect, even the cancer journey itself, I'm already tearing up and I haven't said anything, is that having the support of family and friends can mean everything. I mean, I really truly believe, and even with each other, even the fact that I could text Alexa and say, I feel like I'm about to throw up and I'm on day 2 of the chemo. What did you do? And she would give me every detail. And right away, my anxiety was less. Similarly, I had after, like we were saying, with this journey, you find out the most absurd news so far of our lives, and you don't have a choice. You just have to dive in and do it. And so I think everything I mentioned before was from February 4th to about June 6th. All of it, the freezing of the eggs, the rehab, the brain, the cancer treatment, everything, and the surgery. So long story short, when I was going through the Livestrong egg freezing, it wasn't a matter of, Chrissy, would you like to do this? It was, all right, next week you're going in and you're doing the 2 weeks of this. Let's see what happens. And I still had double vision from my surgery and I was a hot mess. And my mom was the one, I call it she was like the pharmacist, putting all of the drugs together. If I didn't have her and my stepdad helping me, I honestly don't know if I would have gotten through it. So I feel like when we explain what we went through and someone says, oh, you froze your eggs. Okay, that sounds doable. But when we also have the traumatic journey that we're going through in all these areas, any little bit of assistance is super helpful. So even Alexa hasn't even mentioned, she's in a documentary about the surrogacy. And when I watched that, again, I'm single and I already was getting the anxiety of how am I going to handle this? It is so much more than just hearing how it goes. So again, I'm speechless about how emotional it is, as well as difficult making these decisions when we don't really have the choice.
I don't know if Kelly or Alexa want to jump in either on that.
I can jump in.
Go ahead,
I knew that was
Alexa.
going to happen. We were going to say it at the same time.
Go ahead, Alexa.
Okay. So yeah, Chrissy, you've touched on so much of it. I think it can really make and break somebody's cancer journey. The emotional support is so crucial. We were so lucky to have the support that we did. I really, I'm a nurse, I'm very science brained, but I really do believe that the more you can get into a positive headspace, the more you can be optimistic about your situation, the better you're going to do. If you believe that things are going to continuously go downhill, then oftentimes they continuously go downhill. So for me in particular, I gave myself no choice but I made it a very conscious decision to be very optimistic and to not shut out my family. I think there are so many, and friends, I think there are so many people who, for lack of a better term, kind of crawl into a hole with a diagnosis like this. And then when you top off the IVF and the infertility and the surrogacy, it's just rubbing salt in a wound. It's taking one part of your life that is extremely vulnerable and then just taking another part of your life and adding in all of that hurt into your bucket already. So there's even though these are such beautiful things and such beautiful moments, and we just did our second IVF transfer into our gestational carrier last week, and it never gets easier. They talk about parenting and having a child is like having a piece of your heart kind of running around in the world, and you can't really do much about it. And for us, it just happens sooner. There's a part of my heart that I'm hoping and praying for. And it's so different and so raw compared to so many people's normal journeys. And just on top of a cancer journey, it can really do damage to an individual if you don't have that support. So just being open and honest and, not being private about it in a sense, has been having to really invite in that community has been so instrumental in me doing so well in my cancer journey, I believe.
And do you have a support group in terms of the surrogacy piece as well, like in essence other cancer survivors going through the process, or is that something you haven't been able to find?
Not so many. A lot of they know so little about mine and Christy's tumors in particular, that I don't really come in contact with people who are specifically going through what I'm going through. I see more women who have more reproductive cancers like Kelly does. But yeah, there's not a huge evident community where it's like, here's where you can go. And if you're not close with family or friends, I can very much imagine how this is a very lonely road and something that it's not extremely evident unless you have the energy to go and look for a community, which that energy sometimes is not there when you're dealing with everything and it seems like the world is kind of closing in on you with all that you're dealing with. So
Kelly, if you want to jump in.
Sure. I think both of you said it very well, that family and friends really make the journey so much easier. And I experienced that myself too, so I feel very lucky. I feel like my cancer journey and the fertility journey were very different though, in terms of my own mindset. I was very gung-ho, let's get it done for my cancer journey, and whatever I needed to do, I was willing to do. I had no trouble just getting it done. I was very upbeat, and even my dad would be like, you're so happy. Like, how are you so happy going through this? And I was like, well, I know the plan. I know what I need to do. And I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to move on, and we're going to kick its butt, and that's it. But the surrogacy, and I'm sure Alexa felt this, was, very challenging. And I found myself kind of in that hole that you described. I'm going to get emotional, but I felt like I was robbed of a lot of experiences. I really wanted to surprise my husband and say, hey, I'm pregnant, or surprise my family and say that I'm pregnant. I didn't get to do that. So in the beginning, I was kind of like, I wanted to hide the the transfer dates from my family so that I could have like a more traditional, like, woohoo, we're having a baby. But I learned early on that it wasn't going to be a normal process. We went through 3 transfers before we were able to have my daughter. We had 2 miscarriages and a failed transfer. So it was very, very heartbreaking. And I think if I had any like words of wisdom to anybody going through this, is that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And I was very set up for a sprint. I was ready to get in there, do a transfer, and be done with it. So I would say that this emotional support during the surrogacy helped me get through, because there's days I didn't even want to get out of bed because it was something that was supposed to be my rainbow after the storm, and it just wasn't working out that way. So I think having that emotional support is everything, because there was days I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't bring myself to pump myself up. So, and then, something I did want to mention that I felt from day one of my cancer journey is having the support of your work or your boss, I think was really important in my journey. I was very lucky that they let me do whatever I needed to do, supported me. And I work in special education. I'm a behavior analyst, and I work in a high stress job, and they were there for me through it all. And that includes the surrogacy journey. If I needed to not be there to go to a transfer or go to blood work or whatever I needed to do, they supported that. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but I think that educating the job force and the workplace about this is so incredibly important, so that people understand that it's not just getting pregnant. There's so much more to it.
And I think, for those in the crowd that don't have a lot of background knowledge on surrogacy from a finance standpoint, I hate to give the numbers out because they are astronomical, but I mean, in a, probably the lowest cost surrogacy process in the US when you don't have a family or friend, it's probably in the 100,000 range, even if you have the embryos created. And that's without any hiccups. I tell people our agency fee could be 0 and you could be spending 150,000 just because of insurance and medical and surrogate fees and expenses and all these different things. So it is a giant cost. When I first met with one of the charitable organizations that does give grants out for this, and they were telling me they give anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000. It's good and it's helpful, but it's number one, it's tough to give that money to a person who already has 150,000 sitting there, and all they need is this extra 5 for them because they're helping other cancer survivors with other bills. But 2, it doesn't really impact. So there's got to be ways to find funding or to create a different funding source and a different charitable source that gives more money to make this process easier. So Kelly, you touched on a little bit about your journey. Alexei, I don't know if you want to touch on it, but how, maybe you kind of all have touched it tangentially, but how that surrogacy, what it's like, the surrogacy process from, even though you used family or friends, finding that person willing to carry it and what that day-to-day is like with your carrier.
Now I'm going to get emotional. It's equal parts magical and heartbreaking and just hard to hold space for everybody's emotions. It's not just you as the single source with the pregnancy. It is you becoming a mother, and separately your gestational carrier or surrogate physically going through everything. So feeling those hormones, feeling those aches and pains of pregnancy, the nausea, the food aversions, physically feeling everything that you're not, and then you are emotionally going through this journey. So it's you're the one who's not on the hormones, so you're the one who can kind of be strong in a sense for everybody else in the process. So it's a big weight on the shoulders. So you definitely need to learn to hold multiple kinds of emotions and really rely, like the theme here is just relying on your support system to help you get through as well. But the process, like to be able to have a biological child while keeping myself safe so that I can be their mother, there's no there's really no way to say how special and how lucky we are to have that available. And so many people do not have that available to them. So to be able to truly say that you're holding your daughter, your son, who comes from you, you see your family, you see you and your husband or your partner or spouse in that little being, is unlike anything you can ever experience. But like we've also touched on, if I didn't have the support financially, that's the main roadblock here. There's so much that's taken from us as cancer survivors and people who are still working through cancer. There's so much that's taken from us. And this is something that can just be so beautiful and give us something to help fill that hole a little bit. But the finances are just so astronomical. And we didn't use family, we used friends. So there was a little bit more financial, more tens of thousands of dollars to really, it is a risk for the person carrying as well. You could lose your uterus. You could, in the worst scenarios, I'm a labor and delivery nurse, I see it. You can lose your life. Bleeding and postpartum hemorrhages and very serious illnesses can arise after pregnancy that can be fatal. And it's a big risk. So there is a lot of financial cushion that sometimes needs to happen, even if it's a dear friend doing this good deed for you, even if it is out of the goodness of their hearts. It can be hard to make that decision without additional finances on top of what we're being charged from the fertility clinics. So it can be astronomical.
You also just reminded me, this kind of led me to how we, especially with all of the amazing studies that especially MSK is aiming for, everyone is trying to normalize our lives, including us, the three of us. We are positive. We are trying to live every day. When I don't tell anyone that there's a tumor sitting in my brain, they would never know, luckily. However, we try to live our normal lives. I'm, 30, try to think, okay, I'm going to find my man, going to get married, I'm going to have kids, live in the suburbs. And then I remember this is totally different than every friend that I know, what they're going through. My journey cannot be that. So it's truly trying to find a way to lead to that normalcy with the surrogacy. I mean, even hearing both of their stories, I am super anxious in that this is not easy. This is not just something physical or financial. It's all of that put together. And it's not only a journey with yourself, it's with your partner, honestly, with whoever else is involved. And one of the things I've thought about a ton, because we are type A planners, is I don't know if I want to take someone that's already in my life and have them be the one with me in this journey, which both of you have done, and it's amazing. And my fear is, will I then not feel like it's solely my journey and my kid? And again, I don't know because I've never done this, but that's where I ideally would be able to choose someone who's amazing that we don't have a personal relationship yet. However, the truth is I would never be able to afford that. So it's not an option. However, I've had those days where I'm sitting in bed 3 a.m. thinking, who would I even choose? I don't have a sister. I have close friends, but would they do it? Would it be too much for them, for me? So long story short, I noticed that this is so complex. I don't see a simple solution to that.
If I could just jump in and say, Kristen, I think I had a lot of those feelings. I'm very close with my sister, so it was no brainer for her to offer that. But I had a lot of those feelings like, she's going to get to experience all those things that I wish I could experience. But I think even if it's a surrogate that you don't know, they can make you a part of every bit of the process. And I think that's what helped me cope with not being a part of it myself. We recorded ourselves singing and reading books to the baby, and she would play it to the baby every night. And we Zoomed into the meetings that we could because of COVID, and she made us a part of it as much as she possibly could. I'm sure, Dean, that you could speak on that too, but I'm sure that's probably not unique to just the family. But I think really finding that bond with the surrogate really helps. And of course, I had that with my sister, but I think the baby has a very special bond with my sister as well. And I have no jealousy about that. I think it's the most beautiful bond in the world. And she recognizes my sister's voice. And I think there's something very special about this gift that she was able to give to me, and that now she gets to see her grow up and be part of that. And I just think that a surrogate, no matter if it's, you know them or not, is really like an angel and from heaven, because they're able to give us this gift that we wouldn't be able to have otherwise.
Yeah, I think, not to plug a future panel, Suzanne, but having some gestational carriers, both unknown and known to people, is a really eye-opening experience for people, because there's always been this stigma in the news and the media about surrogacy and who the surrogates are. And it's a pretty amazing group of women that really put their lives on hold and put things at risk. And yes, they get paid a fee, but it's not a substantial fee for what they go through. And their stories are all very similar, and they all, for the majority of them, have this similar they want to give this gift, and they think it's almost as impactful and powerful to them as it is to the families they assist. So Kelly, since you've completed a surrogacy and have the baby that you've been talking about, what kind of take us through the end game and what it was like to be there when the baby was born, and to be in that room, and how it's been since?
Yeah, I think I held my breath the entire process until we were at the hospital on the day of, because everything is just always constantly changing. But, I think COVID really changed things a little bit in terms of were we going to be able to be in the hospital. But that's me with her. I got to be in the room when my sister delivered her. It was a C-section, and the doctor that delivered our daughter actually delivered my niece and my nephew. So it was a very special moment. And she let me see her. She dropped the curtain and let me see her coming right out of the uterus. So it was the most surreal moment of my whole life, and worth the 2 years of heartache that led up to it. It was really special. And, my husband was waiting in the hallway, and they cleaned her up and got her ready, and we rolled her. I got to roll her out to meet my husband, and it was really, really special. And not for one moment did I feel like she wasn't mine. And she's so special, and so she makes me very happy. She's worth every second of heartache. So Kristen, you'll get there. Alexa, whoever is struggling, it's worth every single moment of pain to see that little face in the morning. And I think she's destined for great things too. And I think she, will be another advocate for this too. And I think it's a really special journey. And I think one that we should be shouting from the rooftops to make it happen for other people who are struggling.
Yeah. I can tell you from all my testimony at different places that I am very boring when I talk. That the people that actually have the impact with senators and congressmen and are you. I mean, your stories go so much further than what I can say and what anyone else can say in the industry. It's more of the actual people that have gone through it. We've seen it on, just pushing this legislation, but also in the people that are against surrogacy. When we confront them with parents and children and surrogates, their minds do change, because they realize, academia can go so far, but when you actually tangibly talk to people that have experienced this process, it's a lot different. So before we get to questions, each of you, if you want to do a 2 minutes finale on number one, where you are now, if you could go back. I mean, it seems like you actually were in the perfect place where you got diagnosed and went through your fight, in the sense that this knowledge was out there. But, what would you tell to someone who's kind of in those early stages of the diagnosis? What do you wish was told to you, or what was told to you that you would love to pass on to other people that didn't get that? So I'll start with you, Kristen.
So this one it's a bit unique. Of course, it's not about the surrogacy itself, but all of us around the same age going through, let's hope, the most absurd journeys of our life with this cancer journey. Something that I find myself on the street or at Trader Joe's talking to the cashier about this, that I went through my live funeral, where I, all of a sudden at 27 thought I was about to die, and everyone that I know or used to know me in elementary school heard that. And hundreds of people reached out and basically told me, maybe there's one thing that they liked about me a million years ago, whatever it could be. And I realized that journey all of a sudden gave me a new perspective towards life, a new person. And that's something that many people don't experience. Either they do when they're 90 or 100, or they realize it and they pass away the next day. So while this has been a journey that I never would have chosen. I'm oddly grateful for it because of all of this. It's really changed me as a person. So I think that's something I like to remind others. And every day, whether morning or night, I focus on at least 3 little wins of the day. I mean, this presentation is a huge win of the year, but little things to start appreciating in life that I used to just take so for granted. And now, especially with this journey, that's not an option anymore. You have to really, appreciate the littlest things.
Yeah, well said, Chrissy. And to clarify, I do have my daughter Eloise from our first surrogacy journey, and she is the absolute light of my life. And this was so impactful to be able to go through it the way that we did. And it is truly in this process, and in the way that so many of us here have intertwined cancer with fertility and growing our families, there really is so much hope to be had. And there are so many treatments, and there are so many people willing to support and to learn and to help. And that's what's going to help us take those steps towards eradicating this disease in full. And to truly, to truly say that there is support and there is hope, and to never lose it, even when you're in that hole and in the deepest despairs of what you have been robbed of. This community is here, and your family and friends will step up like they never thought that they could. And you will all learn so many things about yourselves and what it means to be human, and what we can truly accomplish to help each other thrive and survive, and to really never lose that, and to move forward always.
Very well said. Just to add to that, I think I feel very similar to both of you, but I think someone told me once, one of my doctors, that I'm my own best advocate. So I would say that for any cancer survivor, and that goes for your cancer journey and surrogacy, that if you don't know something or you're unsure about the process, ask, push, get the information that you need, look for the support, look for the financing, because everyone deserves to have a chance at a family. And I think the thing that's most important for me, for people to understand, is that it doesn't matter how you build your family, is that you have your family, and that you're still their mom. It doesn't matter how that happens, you're still their mom, and they're still going to light up your life. But I think that whatever you need to do to make it happen, do it. And I hope, just like Alexa and Kristen said, that it won't be so difficult for the women that come after us, or the men, whoever the patient is. I hope that things get easier down the road, but just to keep pushing.
Well, thank you through you. And as I said, we'd love to get any questions for any of us. I'm happy to answer boring legal ones if you have any of those as well. But we'd love to open the floor. And if Suzanne, you want to jump in as well?
Absolutely. So I love the fact that, Kelly, you were able to take advantage of the fertility program, and Chrissy as well. Alexa, I'm sorry. It's one of those things. It is a difficult every day. I have the honor of running the fertility program here at Livestrong. And the hardest thing is to know that we can't serve everybody who needs help that day, right? That we just can't. And it's not a matter of we don't want to. It's a matter of money, isn't it always, right? But we have helped over 16,000 people, and there are so many thousands of others that we would love to help. So, and thank you for being your own advocates, for sure. I would love to hear questions. I have questions, but I want to open, I hope that other people who are on here, I know a lot of you, so I would love to have you ask them questions while they're here, and they get a chance to answer in a really raw and vulnerable way. Even Dean.
I guess I do have a question. If Dean, in a snippet, can explain, though, I don't know if that $100,000 you shot out earlier for surrogacy included some of the legal costs. Yeah. I'm just curious, in a nutshell, then what are the legal ramifications, and that just not only are these women going through so many of the biological things that are happening with their bodies, but then the legal side, I can imagine that would be a whole other level of emotional strain. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you want to make sure legally you do it right. And there are certain states where you can't do it. I mean, there's cases right now in Michigan where a sibling carried for their cancer survivor sister, and the actual parents can't get rights to the baby right now, or at least can't get their names on the birth certificate. So you want to make sure you have proper contracts in place so that, you know, if any issue does arise, that you're protected from a parentage standpoint. You want to work in a state where you know your parentage rights are going to be secure after the baby, or either before or after the baby's born. So, you know, usually when I get a bad legal case, it's someone who just didn't have the background and the education on this topic before, and they were matched in a state they shouldn't have been matched in, and now they have to create something. But yeah, usually that 100 includes agency fees, it includes legal fees, it includes insurance, it includes the medical costs, and then the surrogate's fees and expenses, that kind of all the different chunks of the process.
I can also jump in there as well, since our surrogacy journeys, one was in Nashville, Tennessee, and the other one is here in Virginia where we live. So that has been, I've seen the differences between the two legal processes. When we were in Nashville, we were able to get a pre-birth order. So my husband and I were able to be on our daughter's birth certificate, approved, stamped by a judge before our delivery date. Now that we're moving into our next surrogacy journey here in Virginia, that doesn't seem to be as up to speed with kind of what we're doing and the nature of what this actually means. We're pretty much officially going to have to adopt our daughter days after, because they still, and I can see how this can hurt somebody who, and just add another bit of salt to that wound, because it's the same process, being able to give that, the carrier of the child, whether it's the birth mother or in our case, a gestational carrier, there is a period of time where they're allowed to rescind their surrender of the baby. Obviously, we have all of the paperwork in place that wouldn't happen, as genetically, biologically, this baby is ours, but the system is still also not up to speed. A pre-birth order is the way to do it, but we're technically going to have to adopt our daughter after the fact, because of the way that we have to do this. So I can also see how that would add salt to the wound of somebody who's not as supported, and to really think about that. And it can be really heavy to consider.
Virginia has one of the original surrogacy statutes.
Oh, yes.
It was based on the adoption statute, so it has that 72-hour right of rescission.
We're lucky that they don't have to now walk the child off of the grounds of the hospital and into our arms.
Hey, that used to be my favorite conversation when I was with a group of friends, and I'd get a call that walk the baby out of the hospital and hand it over, because 16 years ago surrogacy was a little different in the United States. I sounded like I was running a black market baby selling business on the side, but yeah.
I do also, I'm sorry, Dean, I do want to share that we don't get these requests often, but I do get requests from our navigators where surrogates are requesting fertility stimulation medication support, and I do say yes. So just to let you know, and I know it's a small circle that you run in, but certainly the answer will be yes on that cancer journey for that support from us.
And I can say, from an overall legal standpoint, you know, as a positive, that the country has been very progressive, and really there's only been positive statutes and legislation coming out for the last 10 years, and there's really only 3 or 4 states you can't do surrogacy in at the moment. So it is one area of the law that's been positive. And I expect it to continue. So at least we have the framework that works. We are more expensive than every other country for surrogacy. A big piece of it is the medical part. There are still lots of insurance companies that won't cover a surrogate's even if a woman has maternity coverage, it won't cover a surrogate pregnancy. So that's really where the bigger costs come into play.
All right, what
And
else?
I'll just say one thing. I mean, I feel like my mind is blown by the amount of information that was shared here. I really didn't know what to expect coming in. I just I usually pepper, some of these sessions with multiple questions, and I'm at a loss for words, just how comprehensive, all the three panelists were. So no, thank you so much for sharing this, and I hope I could connect with you offline.
Yeah, it has been a wonderful session. This won't be the last time you'll see fertility and surrogacy at Livestrong, I'm sure. Are there any last minute thoughts? Dean, what about you? What if there was one thing that we could do to change surrogacy? What would it be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Chris and I will happily talk to you offline to develop the Livestrong surrogacy piece of the fertility. And I'll get you as many funders and surrogacy agencies and IVF clinics willing to give major discounts. I can, but no, I think, it's the streamline that's been going across. You're going to get there for those out there who's listening that are patients, and for those that there are so many people willing to fight for you on the advocacy side to get this funding, to get better laws in the states that make noise. And Kristen first came to me from someone, and I had no idea who she was, but she reinvigorated me, and then she went on to Suzanne after talking to me. So, what you think you might be a small little cog, but that small cog is going to make everything go, and you may start something huge that's big and successful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us. Kelly, Kristen, Alexa, Dean, Dina, thank you for being so vulnerable and open, and taking the time out of your day to share your stories with complete strangers, because it does mean a lot, and it'll be on YouTube. So there'll be even more strangers watching and hearing your stories. Kelly, your daughter is beautiful. And Alexa, next time we see you, I need pictures to share.
Yes, next time I'm not nocturnal working.
Yes, yes, when you're not nocturnal. Absolutely, absolutely.